Everyone appears to be in position. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to beautiful Vancouver Island. It's a gorgeous day here, as usual, although I'm not sure if it was the folks from out east that brought the clouds, but we'll forgive them. I'm Secretary of State for Seniors and Member of Parliament for Esquimalt-Saanich-Sooke, Stephanie McLean, and I'll be your MC for today's event. It's a privilege to be here with you today on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish, specifically the Esquimalt First Nation, Songhees, Beecher Bay, and the Saanich peoples represented by the Sartlip, Pakwachin, Sayut, Saykum, and Malahat nations. I'm so thankful to the First Nations who have taken care of this land since time immemorial. Across the country, our government is working to strengthen Canada's forestry sector so that communities like those here on the island where Tim grew up, can count on stable jobs, sustainable growth, and a more resilient economy. Today's announcement is about transforming the sector to ensure resilience at a time where it is needed most. So, without further ado, let's get to the matter at hand. Please join me in welcoming the Honourable Tim Hodgson, Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. He's been working to strengthen our forestry sector and is focused on building a stronger Canada for all.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction. Bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Stephanie, for the introduction and the welcome to the island. It's a pleasure to be here in Langford today. I'm very happy to be joined by Stephanie, who is, as she said, a terrific MP from Vancouver Island, as well as my parliamentary secretary, Corey Hogan, with me. Corey has been doing an incredible job in helping me with this file. It's also terrific to have so many provincial and territorial colleagues with me, including Minister Bushy from Manitoba, Minister MacDonald from the Northwest Territories, Minister Harris and Associate Minister Holland from Ontario, Minister Lowen from Alberta, Minister Compton from PEI, and our host in this beautiful province, Minister Parmar. Thank you for hosting us here today. Further, it's great to see so many friendly faces from our forest products industry in British Columbia joining us here this morning. And I look forward to our discussions with them later today. Before I start, I want to acknowledge communities that are currently facing challenges due to wildfires, especially here in BC and in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and the Northwest Territories. Our government stands ready to support your provincial and territorial governments in keeping your families and communities safe. Many of you also know this, but as Stephanie said, I spent my early teen years living in a small forest products town right here on northern Vancouver Island. That experience taught me a great deal. It taught me that being in this industry is not always easy, especially as it faces tariffs, fiber supply constraints, shifting market dynamics, and a changing climate. It taught me that the forest sector creates good jobs and helps people build their lives, support their families, and stay rooted in their communities. And it taught me just how central this industry is to the very fabric of this country. Because when the forest product sector is strong, the communities are strong. And here in BC, from coast to coast, we have strong communities. Today, Canada's forest product sector is at a turning point. To meet this moment, since August of 2025, our government has announced over $2 billion in measures designed to ensure Canada's forest product sector remains competitive and resilient. These measures include enhanced access to financing, liquidity supports, worker protections, and tools to help companies modernize and invest in their futures. However, the industry's challenges run deep. And despite federal government support, since August of 2025, more than a dozen sawmills have announced closures, affecting more than 2,000 jobs, with temporary curtailments affecting another 40 facilities and a further 1,000 jobs. These disruptions are also affecting harvesters, the pulp and paper sector, and remanufacturers across the country. There is clearly a crisis in this industry, and like the trade war, it's one that Canadians did not ask for, but it's one we must collectively win by taking action to pivot, to grow, to modernize, and diversify the forest product sector. Based on the recommendations of the Canadian Forest Sector Transformational Task Force's report, which we are releasing today, and following discussions at the Canadian Council of Forestry Ministers meetings over the next 2 days, that's exactly what we intend to do. Our government will always defend this industry, which has been a mainstay of the Canadian economy and the lifeblood of so many towns like the one I lived in on northern Vancouver Island. But rather than simply extending the sector's life support, we now must challenge and support it to transform into a modern, thriving industry that can build Canada's future and achieve sustained, independent prosperity. This work is anchored both internationally and domestically. Internationally, we're focused on diversifying our trade with new trading partners beyond the United States and growing trade where we already have a presence. Over the course of many trade missions in the past year, it's been made very clear over and over by our allies that Canada has what the world wants, and that includes our forest products. Domestically, we're focused on building resilience and catalyzing innovation. We're taking direct action to create new markets at home so that the Canadian forest product sector can benefit from Canadian customers, and Canadian customers can benefit from Canada's forestry sector. With our new federal Buy Canadian policy and the opportunity for Canadian wood to serve as a pivotal input into new affordable homes through the Build Canada Homes program, we are choosing to be our own best customer. And through the $6 billion Team Canada Strong initiative announced in the Spring Economic Statement, we will recruit, train, and hire the workers who will build the projects Canadians are counting on, including in the forest products industry. That is up to 100,000 new jobs for Red Seal trade workers in the next 5 years. Further, today I'm pleased to announce the enhancement and creation of new programs to be delivered by the Business Development Bank and through our 7 regional development agencies. Starting immediately, BDC's softwood lumber loan program will be enhanced to improve access to financing. That includes increasing the maximum loan size from $30 million to $50 million and enhancing the terms for letters of credit offered under the program. BDC will also begin delivering 2 new programs that provide direct loans of up to $25 million to companies across the forest sector for harvesting to pulp and paper, for harvesters, for the pulp and paper sector, and for remanufacturers. These programs will help companies meet immediate pressures as we move to transform and adapt to future market conditions. The federal government is also adding $300 million in regional trade response initiatives to help ensure that small and medium-sized businesses have access to the financing they need to invest in market diversification and enhance productivity. Further, we're establishing a new $100 million regional development fund to provide targeted funding dedicated to community mobilization and economic diversification in regions significantly impacted by disruptions in the forest sector. To support the implementation of these programs, we expect Canadian financial institutions to continue working with businesses to support this sector. In addition to these measures, I'm pleased to announce the Government of Canada is investing nearly $130 million in 56 forest sector projects across the country via the Natural Resources Canada Forest Sector Transformation Programs, which we recently recapitalized with $500 million of new funding. These projects will advance new low-carbon wood technologies. They will expand the use of mass timber in construction, which is a key part of our plan to build more homes faster. They will support Indigenous participation in forest sector businesses. They will help manufacturers create higher value products for Canadian wood, and they will open doors to new export markets around the world as part of our strategy to diversify Canadian trade. Of the nearly $130 million announced today, the Forest Enhancement Society of British Columbia will receive $37 million for their project, which is developing a new approach to turn more low-value and residual forest fiber into valuable end products. This money will go towards gathering, processing, and transporting material to facilities that can convert it into useful and innovative products. So instead of being burned, fiber can be used to make pulp, bioenergy, pellets, and other products, creating more value from every tree. At the same time, this past year it has been clear that in moments such as this, investments alone are not enough. Investments without strategy will not create a sector that thrives in the long term, or one that maintains jobs and diversifies beyond the cyclical nature and pain associated with unfair and unjust U.S. tariffs. Many provinces and territories who manage 88% of our forests have done great work encouraging their industries towards a longer-term transformation. But coordination has not existed previously on a Team Canada level. That's why the Government of Canada established the Canadian Forest Sector Transformational Task Force. Earlier this year, the task force brought together leaders from across the country. They listened to provinces and territories. They engaged partners. They engaged industry. They engaged workers, and they engaged Indigenous peoples. They focused on what we can control with the tools we have at our disposal to ensure a competitive, resilient, and relevant forest sector. And they delivered. Today, I'm pleased to release their report, which includes a set of recommendations for governments, federal, provincial, and territorial, on where action is most needed. The task force recommendations focused on a few critical areas. First, the provinces and territories must improve access to competitively priced wood fiber supply, the foundation of the sector's value chain. Second, the report outlines investments governments can make that would be strategic and transformative, not simply Band-Aid solutions. Third, the task force has recommended ways to expand the use of wood in construction, including mass timber, to make construction more affordable and accelerate the work being done by Build Canada Homes. Fourth, the report discusses appropriate support for workers and communities. Finally, it suggests how we can build more resilience by growing domestic and global market opportunities. We are taking this advice seriously, and now I want to move from advice to action. So this week, as I gather with my provincial and territorial colleagues, industry, and Indigenous partners at the Canadian Council of Forest Ministers meeting here in Langford, we will discuss and plan how we can work together as one united Canada to implement the task force recommendations. The provinces and territories will be crucial to this effort because they are responsible for making the decisions that affect the forest sector on the ground. Indigenous partners who form almost 10% of the sector's workforce and who have intimate knowledge of the land and forest will also bring critical perspectives to this work, ensuring it is sustainable and workable for the people who will need to lead this transformation on a daily basis. I look forward to hearing from my provincial and territorial counterparts, as well as Indigenous partners, on the actions they plan to take to tackle the challenges before us. For our part at the federal government, I intend to bring forward proposals for the federal response. All these commitments will inform an action plan for the sector, which we will share publicly at the end of this week's meetings. This action plan will serve as the foundation of our upcoming national forestry strategy, which will contain concrete measures and be released by the end of 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, the reality is this: the pressures facing Canada's forestry sector are not temporary. They are structural. They are global, and they are accelerating. Responding to them will require more than incremental change. It will require coordination, urgency, and a shared commitment to building a stronger, more resilient sector for the future. Only by working together will we reduce regulatory overlap between the levels of government. Will we tie our investments to long-term certainty on wood supply? Can we create functional, sustainable funding tools and send more Canadian forest products to customers around the globe? This work will not be easy, but I think back to the younger Tim Hodgson living in the forest products community on the northern tip of this island, and how much he loved that experience. And I look forward to the next generation of young Canadians, knowing that the industry in which they grow up in will sustain them and their children. And it's clear that we have no choice but to do the hard work for those next generations of Canadians. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now or never, and together we will choose now. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Minister Hodgson. I know we particularly appreciated your reflections growing up on the island in a forestry community. Our next speaker is wearing two hats today. Not only is he BC's Minister of Forests, but he is also the chair of the Canadian Council of Forest Ministers meeting, which brings many of us to beautiful Langford today. Please join me in welcoming my friend and colleague here on the island, the Honourable Ravi Parmar, to say a few words.
Thanks, Stephanie. Good morning. Bonjour tout le monde. It's such an honor and privilege to be here with you. I've actually got three hats on today. I'm also the very proud MLA for Langford Highlands as well. One of the reasons why we chose this beautiful part of the world was I get the opportunity, Minister Hodgson, to get home every night, which I know is not something my colleagues share, so I hate to bring it in. A little bit jealous. Really grateful to be here on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples this morning for this announcement and for the start of what is going to be a very important week for forestry here in British Columbia and from coast to coast to coast. It was about a year ago that I was in Chetwynd, British Columbia, and I met a guy named Bob. Bob was one of the lead workers at that facility. It's a West Fraser facility in Chetwynd that's been running on one shift for the last number of years. Bob, every morning when he arrives to work, treats all of the staff there at that facility like his children. He walks around, looks at every part of that mill, makes sure everything's okay, and he walked me through what a typical day would look like for him in terms of keeping an eye on his workers, his family. One of the most touching aspects of that tour of that mill was walking to a clock that showed how many days it had been since a worker had been injured. Bob was particularly proud of the safety record of himself, his employees, and that facility. It was at that moment, very early on in my time as British Columbia's Minister of Forests, that I truly understood how forestry is all about people and place. And I think you heard that in Minister Hodgson's comments with the deep connection that he himself has to forestry. In my first conversation with Minister Hodgson, he had shared with me his deep connection not only to forestry, but also to British Columbia and Vancouver Island, where we are here today. Today is a good news story for forestry workers, and for forestry communities, not only just here in British Columbia, but throughout Canada. As Minister Hodgson acknowledged, forestry is facing a difficult period in time, and one would argue the most difficult period in the history of our country, with unfair, unjust, two duties and tariffs by Donald Trump and the United States government. We've been working together to not only forge powerful partnerships, not only make more in British Columbia, make more in Canada, but also defend and fight like hell for forestry workers from coast to coast to coast. I want to thank Minister Hodgson. I want to thank Parliamentary Secretary Corey Hogan and the federal government for their leadership. I look forward to the conversations, and in particular want to thank the task force for their detailed work. It is not easy to be given a short timeline, but I want to thank the co-chairs in particular who are going to get an opportunity to brief my colleagues over the next couple of days on their important findings. And you certainly have Minister Hodgson, a commitment from British Columbia to work with you to restore confidence in this important sector and once again stand up for those forestry workers and get this sector not only back on its feet, but also move it, structurally change the sector from boom and bust to stability and certainty. Once again, I want to thank all of my colleagues behind me and those that are here from provinces and territories for their leadership, for the work that they are doing to defend the interests of forestry workers. And I very much look forward to the dialogue that we're going to have over the next couple of days. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Minister Parmar. Next up, please join me in welcoming Jason Fisher, the Executive Director of the Forest Enhancement Society of BC. His dedication and leadership are helping to strengthen and restore forests across this province. Jason?
Bonjour, hello, thank you very much. I want to express my appreciation to the Government of Canada, to Minister Hodgson, to Secretary McLean, to Minister Parmar, and everyone who is making this day possible. You've already heard a little bit about the project that is being funded through NRCan and related to the Forest Enhancement Society of British Columbia. In essence, we are taking wood that was considered to be waste and turning it into useful products, and in the process, supporting jobs and communities. I'd be remiss not to thank the people who are really doing the work. It's not the Forest Enhancement Society of BC, it is the First Nations, local governments, contractors, foresters, community forest holders, some of whom are in the audience today, I'm very happy to see, who are out there planning projects that are meaningful, effective, and are really transformational for the communities that they impact. I want to tell you a brief story about a visit I made last week to a project that we're funding in the Nazco First Nation territory west of Quesnel, British Columbia, where through the impacts of the mountain pine beetle epidemic, there was a wall of falled trees, dead fallen trees, crisscrossed so that you couldn't see the ground. Animals could not get through. And this territory, this land is at the flank of the reserve of the Nazco First Nation and a significant fire threat to their community. Over the last 3 years, I believe they've spent 56 days evacuated from their community because of wildfires. And we were there to see what happens when you bring together good forest stewardship, effective partnerships, and local leadership. And we saw an area that had been transformed, where the elders were telling us that that bears would return, that grouse and deer would return. The operators were telling us about the moose that they were seeing on the site every morning. And the material that we were taking from there was going to feed local pulp mills, local pellet plants, and local sawmills. And that is the promise of good forest management that is designed to leave something better behind for future generations. The contractor there, a man named Quentin, comes from France, and he came from France where he trained to operate commercial thinning equipment to come to British Columbia because he saw the opportunity to transform our forest sector. And he also told me that despite the fact that he had to come from France to do this, there were 3 local youth from Quesnel who had trained on the equipment there and were now operating and qualified operators to do that same work that he had learned in his youth in France. So, ministers, that is the promise of this investment that you've made in the Forest Enhancement Society of BC. We will, we're very thankful, humbled, and we'll do our best to make a difference for the forest sector, for the communities and workers of British Columbia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. And thank you to all of our speakers. And thank you to all of you for being here today. Particularly Tim and Corey for coming to visit us on Vancouver Island, and Minister Parmar for hosting. I will now turn it over to Minister Hodgson's Director of Communications, Carolyn, who will moderate media availability. So please stick around as well for a photo op following questions from the media. Carolyn, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Secretary McLean. As mentioned, we'll now move to the media availability portion of the announcement. So we will begin with media who are in person, then move to those we have online on our Zoom link. If you can just raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. Okay, perfect. I can bring the microphone over to you. And I would just ask that you state your name and your outlet before asking your question. And if it's for any of our particular speakers, just let them know so we can have the right person head up to the podium. And we will do one question, one follow-up.
Thank you. Ben O'Hara-Byrne from Global National, Global BC. Thank you for coming, Mr. Hodgson. A question to both Minister Hodgson and Minister Parmar. There is a deep sense in this province that BC has been left out of necessary funding to keep forestry vibrant and alive. What do you tell forestry workers today about how this announcement changes that, Minister Hodgson, and to you, Minister Parmar? Thank you.
I can assure you that BC has not been left out. I think this is my third trip to BC in 3 weeks. We are incredibly focused on ensuring there are opportunities in British Columbia, both in the forestry sector and across all sectors. I would point out that fully 30% of all the major projects that we've announced so far are in the province of British Columbia. I think that's a simple illustration of the fact. I think an illustration of the fact that of the money that we just announced today, 37 million of that is going to an incredible initiative here in British Columbia. And I can tell you that the partnership that we have with Minister Parmar is strong. We talk on a regular basis. We talk about how we need to transform this industry. I think it's important to understand we know this industry is really challenged. This industry is the canary in the coal mine. This is an industry that under free trade is in its 5th version of the trade war. It's also an industry that is being buffeted by real challenges with respect to fiber supply, with changing market dynamics and cost structures around the world. And so there are no easy solutions, but what we're here to say today is we're ready to do the hard work. And we will do everything we can to help the forestry sector in this province and in every province. But I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Minister Hodgson. Thanks for the question, Ben. Minister Hodgson has been an outstanding partner for us here in British Columbia, not just in forestry, but in other important sectors. We have been very proud to work with this government under Minister Hodgson and the Prime Minister's leadership to be able to deliver major projects, in particular $88 billion worth of major projects. One of those major projects is forestry. And as Minister Hodgson noted, this is a complicated major project. We are talking about defending the interests of forestry jobs, but also repositioning forestry. Forestry for the last number of decades has been boom and bust. And we are working together to move it away from boom and bust to stability and certainty. We are always going to fight for our fair share here in British Columbia. But I have to give full credit to Minister Hodgson and his team. The announcements that they have made today, in addition to the release of the task force report, are direct advocacy points that British Columbia has put forward over the last number of weeks. And so to Tim's credit, he is a man that listens. And in this case, he is also a man that delivers as well. And we're very grateful for that. This is more than one announcement. This is going to be hard work over the next number of weeks, months, and years. And we're certainly here in British Columbia looking forward to working with Minister Hodgson to get the job done.
Thank you. Quick follow-up, Minister Hodgson, on another topic. What conversations have you had with both Alberta and BC about what preferential route Ottawa would like to see for any future oil pipeline?
As we've been very clear, the proponents propose a route. The proponent is the province of Alberta. The province of Alberta has said they will come forward with a proposed route in July, and we will address that at that time. We're not choosing the route, so we're waiting for the proponent to come forward with the route that they want to propose. That's how the MOU was structured, and that's how we will work with Alberta and British Columbia on this issue.
Thank you very much. Go to our next question.
Mary Brooke from Island Social Trends. So sustainability of BC forests is very important to the BC economy and to British Columbians. So Minister Hodgson, I'm just wondering if this new sort of push to the banking system to, excuse me, to support forestry industry, is that going to produce the result that British Columbians are looking for? Will there be value-added products? Will there, and that's sort of almost the second part, but will there be value-added products produced out of BC forests as part of getting the most out of BC forests?
Since the forests are owned by the province of British Columbia and they set the rules, I think that's as much a question for Minister Parmar as it is for me. But let me just say that I was really impressed by the task force report where they talked about the importance of looking at models where we ensure there is space for the forestry industry, there is space for conservation, and there is space for mixed use of forests. It was something they called out. They looked around the world at different models, and they were clearly advocating that as we look to ensure we have the right fiber supply dynamics to see new investment in this industry, we're also focused on sustainability and we're also focused on conservation. And that's something that, as you've seen with our Prime Minister, we've announced with the North Coast Critical Minerals and Conservation Corridor, significant new set-asides for conservation. You've seen new marine habitat preserved. So what this government's all about is we need to walk and chew gum at the same time. We need to develop our resources, but we need to do it in a responsible way in partnership with Indigenous peoples. That's how Canada's going to build strong. That's how we're going to be more resilient and independent in this really challenging world. But on the question of more higher value products, I think that's a shared goal from both of us. But I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Marion. Thanks, Minister Hodgson. Maybe just a couple of things I would add. Yesterday, the government of British Columbia announced in partnership with the federal government that we were going to plant 125 million more trees, especially focused in wildlife habitat restoration and in particular wildfire restoration. That's a joint initiative between my ministry and Minister Hodgson's ministry as well. So planting 125 million more trees is good for British Columbia. It's good for Canada. And I would add, as Minister Hodgson noted in the task force report, we have something to be very proud of here in British Columbia and throughout Canada, and that is British Columbia is the most biodiverse place in the world. But not only that, we have the most sustainable forestry practices in the world as well, and that's something we celebrate here in BC. A few weeks ago, I announced in Kelowna a new project that we're launching here in British Columbia called the Make More in BC project. One of the first conversations Minister Hodgson and I had was in order for us to have the necessary investments from our respective governments into industry, we needed to assure that British Columbia and Canada was no longer a jurisdiction that just provided commodity dimensional lumber to Americans. The task force report talks about creating economic clusters. British Columbia is proud to be one of the first provinces to take that task force recommendation and in fact implement it. So we launched our first economic cluster in the Merritt timber supply area. We'll be launching many more in the weeks ahead, entirely focused on making more in BC, creating high-quality value-added wood products. And I would just add, in addition to that, forging powerful partnerships. It's one of the reasons why we were proud to be signees alongside Minister Hodgson and the government of China to see more of our mass timber products heading to China as well, a particular jurisdiction that has seen a lot of low-grade lumber, but we'll hopefully see more higher added value products heading to that jurisdiction.
My follow-up is regarding the increase, Minister Hodgson, in what the BDC can loan to forestry companies. Do you see that as the pivot point for an improvement in the BC forest sector? And sort of pivoting to what Minister Parmar said, Major Projects Office, is Major Projects involved directly with forests?
So I would describe the programs for BDC is helping stabilize the situation. There are a number of things that are called out in the task force report that need to happen for transformation to happen. The number one thing we need to work together on is creating an environment for new investment where the private sector wants to put money into the forestry sector. That's been a challenge, quite frankly, as the task force calls out. Over the last several decades, Canadian forest products companies have been investing more outside of Canada than they have in Canada because they haven't found the right environment to put money to work here. That starts first and foremost with sorting out our fiber supply. We have to get to a place where we've worked through all the different demands on our forests and create clarity around secure fiber supplies going forward so people have the confidence to put new money to work. So the BDC is really around stabilizing the current situation. What we will be talking about together over the next 2 days are what are some of the things we need to do to implement some of the recommendations from the task force so we create that more attractive environment so major proponents want to come and put money to work. And nothing would make me happy to see forest products companies coming to say, hey, we want to put significant money into the forest product sector here. Let's work with the Major Projects Office. So it's absolutely open. What we need to do is create the environment so the private sector wants to put more money into the forest product sector here in BC.
Thank you very much. I'm just looking in the crowd to see if there's anyone who has any final questions. All right, and seeing none, we don't have any on the Zoom line, so we will do the photo op and conclude today's event. Thank you very much.